This is not a video about apps that will teach you how to play piano. I'm sorry, but if you came here to ask that question, my answer is always going to be that you should find a real teacher. Right, now that that's over, let's dive into the best apps for piano teachers to use in lessons and to recommend to students to use at home. Number one is ForScore. There are many score reading apps out there, and I have several of them. I've tried many, but my favorite for general score reading is ForScore. I have all my digital editions of music in there, so I can quickly pull up something a student is working on. Let's say they have the hard copy and I have the digital edition, just so that I don't have to lean into their music, especially when we get to those more advanced levels, when the notation's a bit smaller and I can't actually see it from far away. I can see my beginner's music from the other side of the room, but that's a whole other story. So I have digital editions of sheet music, but I also use ForScore for flashcards. So I have our mobile-friendly version of the Minterval and 60-second flashcards, which are from the Vibrant Music Teaching Library, and I have them in ForScore because I find it so much handier when we're drilling flashcards to flip through them on an iPad here on the stand for the student rather than turning physical flashcards. Next up is Practice Plus. This one, when I got it, was really cheap and the price fluctuates a lot. So I'm not going to tell you how much it costs now because it feels like it changes all the time. If it is really expensive when you look at it, I wouldn't recommend it, but if you can get it at a good price, it's my favorite metronome app. I like that it has all sorts of subdivisions, so you can do different time signatures and then you can divide it quickly into quavers, eighth notes, different subdivisions of the beat really quickly and with a really nice interface. And I also like one of their sounds, which is saying something because I hate the sound of most digital metronomes. I can't be the only one on that. And this one, there's one sound, I think they call it analog. I could be wrong about that, but there's one sound that I can abide. And so that's why it's my favorite app. Next up is a metronome alternative, SuperMetronome Groovebox, which almost wins the award for the longest app title and the hardest to say, but I do say it a lot because I recommend it a lot. Now these days, this piano that I'm sitting beside right now, which is my main teaching piano, this is a Kawai hybrid piano. So it has a screen here in the end of the piano and I can pull up a drummer on that. So that's what I do now most of the time. But before I had that, this was one of my favorite apps. So if you don't happen to have a touchscreen built into your piano that has a drummer in it, I'd say I'm rare. I'm the unusual one in that case, right? So if you don't have that, this app is a great way to do it. It's just a drum kit. It looks kind of like an 80s digital drum situation. I don't know how to describe it, but if you look it up, you'll see what it looks like. And it is just fun. And it's a great alternative to a metronome when you're sick of listening to the metronome, or when your student just responds better to a drummer versus a metronome. Next up is iReal Pro. We have a whole other video specifically about this app and how I use it. There's many ways to use it. It can be a great dynamic backing track option. You can use it to set up specific songs. I use it mostly for chord drills. So when I'm having students practice all their major chords or going around the circle of fifths or doing certain patterns, I set that up in iReal Pro and they can play along with a band, which is great. Now, this isn't an app that I would use personally much as a teacher, and it is our own app, so full disclosure on that, but Vivid Practice is the number one thing I'm telling students to use at home. This stores all of their assignments and helps them to practice effectively and efficiently. They have all their videos and audio that they need and notes from me or their other teachers, and it's all in one spot. My favorite part of it is the organization on the teacher side, and that's something I think we did really well. That's not actually an app, it's a website because the teacher uses the website and the student uses the app, but the app is the thing I want my students to use the most at home. This one is also from us. It's called Vibrant Music Intervals. We created this because there just isn't this out there. It's weird. There's so many. I mean, it's not weird knowing how music education generally goes, but there are so many apps out there for drilling note names. I'm going to name a couple of them in a second, but honestly, there are so many. And there are so many for all sorts of musical things, actually, but very little, if not none, I can think of one other that sort of does this, for intervals. And intervals are how we actually read, note names are not. So that's a topic of a whole other video, and it is here on the channel if you want to check out my thoughts on that. But vibrant music intervals is our way of filling that gap. So it's super cheap. It includes 3 different games you can play so that students don't get bored, and they can drill intervals in all sorts of different ways. Really fun. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 for note names. And honestly, my recommendation is whichever one your student likes the look of the best, because that's what really matters when it comes down to it. But it's nice to have different ones for variety. So NinGenius is the first one, Staff Wars, and NoteRush. Take a look at them, see which one your student likes, and go with that. They have pros and cons to each. So NinGenius, the setup is a little bit different. All of them, you can select which notes you want to drill, which is really important. So that's why I like these 3. But NinGenius, you can have it that the answer is a piano key, like that they call it fingering, but they mean the key on the piano, or you can answer the actual letter. In NoteRush, you're answering by playing the piano, which is good, so it's listening to you. And in Staff Wars, it's also listening to you, but the interface is a little bit different. The notes are scrolling across the screen, which I do like because it encourages us to think about reading that way, as if the music, the written music, is scrolling across, right? And once we pass it in time, whatever speed we're going, it is gone, which I like. DecideNow is super adaptable and very popular if you haven't heard of it before. It's just an app where you can create really pretty looking spinners. So you can create a wheel that's for all the major scales, or different pieces your students need to play, or different challenges you have for them. And you spin the wheel, and that decides what you do or what you include in your composition. I mean, there's so many ways to include it in your lessons. So those are some of my favorite apps, but I'd love to hear yours, so do let me know in the comments.